Off and running here, Big D Energy, Woodward Sports Network, Neil Rule, four-time Stanley Cup champion Darren McCarty here with you at Woodward Sports. Sam Flannel, Spencer Raxter as well. And right now, as promised, when you tune in the Detroit Lions game tomorrow on television, you'll hear this guy, Jason Ross, our guest here on Big D Energy. He'll do the TV play-by-play, also does play-by-play for the Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, ESPN, the Chicago Sky of the WNBA. Guy's doing almost as many games as I am, D-Mac.
You two got it all covered.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, what's up, my friend? How are you?
Neil, what's up, Darren? Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Big fan of the show. Happy to be here.
Absolutely, Jason. Appreciate your time as well. And look, we're going to get into the Detroit Lions. Certainly, you've been out there at camp all week long. But, Jason, for those that don't know, and, the process of you being named the play-by-play guy for the Detroit Lions for the preseason, take us through that, Jason. How did all that work?
Yeah, it was around, I'd say, end of May. Found out I was referred for the opportunity that came up and had some wonderful conversations with the team and everyone in the broadcast department with the Lions who have been great to me. And, those conversations went really well, and then found out kind of officially in early June that I would get this chance and jumped at it right away. Hometown team, grew up a Lions fan. All my family are all Lions fans. So I think they might have been more excited than I am. They're super pumped tomorrow night. So, no, I'm excited. This feels very full circle and pretty surreal to be able to call a game for my hometown team.
Might be your first rodeo, Jason, but obviously Neil said the credentials of being behind the microphone, calling different types of games and stuff like this. What is the one thing when this was announced and it sunk in that you're going to be doing this that you really look forward to? Because you mentioned you are a hometown kid and you've followed this team your whole life, not just reporting on it, but now getting to be able to talk about it. So what for you is the thing you're most excited about?
Yeah, Darren, well, both of you guys have been in Detroit for so long, and you know how passionate this fan base is. And for me, in my lifetime, I've never experienced this much excitement going into a Lions season, and especially nationally with the media. And I think the last time there was this much maybe excitement going into a season, social media didn't really exist. So now you see it everywhere you go, and every time you turn on your phone, there's, a different site talking about the Lions or different networks talking about the Lions. And to be able to kind of be in that role of preseason where we're hopefully previewing what the team is going to look like to go to Kansas City week 1 and play that big game at Arrowhead. We're hopefully previewing what the team will look like on that day and beyond in a season that a lot of people think could be really successful. And you're coming off your first winning season since 2017, favorites maybe win the division title this year. Haven't done that since 1993. So it's really cool for me, I think, to just quite literally step into the role of previewing all this excitement. And I love bringing energy on broadcast, so I think this is something where naturally as preseason, you're not going too crazy over something that happens, but you get to kind of step into and feel that fan excitement. Training camp's been super fun over the last week or so. I think there were 4,500 people lining up a couple of weeks ago for the training camp tickets, so I feel like that kind of conveys the excitement right now. You have Ford Field season tickets sold out for the first time ever. So you're just feeling that every day at camp, and you feel that in the players' voices and when you talk to fans. I talked to a fan the other day who's been a fan since the 1960s. He told me he's never been this excited for a Lions season. So I'm pretty pumped to kind of, hopefully be able to convey why you should be excited.
Jason Ross Jr., our guest here on Big D Energy, Woodward Sports Network. He'll be the TV voice you hear tomorrow for the Detroit Lions and all preseason long for the Detroit Lions on television. So, Jason, give everybody, like we talked about, you're born and bred here, grew up here in this area. Sports fans, you and I worked together at Oakland University for a while as well. Just kind of give everybody your path, man, from the beginning of doing this all the way up until, tomorrow as you take the mic for the Lions.
Yeah, it's been fun over the last couple of weeks because I'm staying with my family here in Farmington Hills. And I live in Chicago now, but staying with the family in Farmington Hills. And just grew up loving Detroit sports. The early 2000s Pistons teams, early 2000s Red Wings, and the Red Wings in 08, and just that team really developed my love for hockey, and that's one of my favorite sports, and basketball, watching the Pistons, and of course the Lions over the years. I remember my first ever Lions game I went to wasn't a very good game. It was 2004, the Colts had Peyton Manning at Detroit on Thanksgiving Day, and we got blown out that day, but it was my first time at Ford Field. And it was just being in sports atmospheres, as you know, Neil, as a play-by-play broadcaster. I think for me, I said to myself one day, this would be pretty cool to be able to be in the atmosphere for a job. And I would always love watching games and watching highlights and hearing the voices behind those highlights who were narrating the games. And kind of fell in love with that around the middle school age. And just from that point on, I was obsessed with it, always studying it, listening to games, and the way of just kind of analyzing what the broadcasters were saying, and reading about it, listening to interviews with broadcasters, trying to meet broadcasters like yourself, Neil, and looking up to you and guys like Ken Cowell and Dan Dickerson with the Tigers, and Dan Miller, who I've seen around Lions camp over the last week or so. Just kind of, we have such a good stable of broadcasters in Detroit, and that was really inspiring for me too. And then I started calling games just for practice in high school, and then college, I went to a small school, Lawrence Tech University in Southfield, and started calling games there. Worked, of course, with you as well, Neil, at Oakland, and you gave me one of my first opportunities to do an Oakland women's basketball, and that's a core memory for me in terms of helping me develop and just kind of sitting there and watching you work. And it was so just watching our broadcasters here, and I would go down to Pistons games and Red Wings games and just call them for practice for reps, and that was something I would do. And nobody really ever heard those games that I was calling, but I would just do it for practice. Then worked in the United School Professional Baseball League in Utica, Michigan, did some writing with Sports Illustrated, and started a digital show with a friend of mine who, you know, Neil, Jenna Rose. We did our Detroit sports show that was digital. We film it and just kind of go down to games and record ourselves talking about Detroit sports. So definitely the roots are here. So it feels really full circle to be back here and now have this opportunity with the Lions.
Talking to Jason Ross Jr., going to do the play-by-play broadcast for the Lions exhibition, local guy. My question as we get into being around training camp and stuff like this, and here at Woodward Sports, we are stoked, not scared, baby. You know that all throughout. My question to you, Jason, from being around the team and being around Allen Park and Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and stuff like this, tell me why it's not the same old Lions. And it's more, I know we can get into the talent and who looks good and this guy who they drafted and stuff, but what about the atmosphere? Like you said, you talked about the fans, the season tickets sold out. You talked about 4,500 people trying to get into practice. You talk about the excitement for tomorrow's game. But what about training camp? Why is it different? Why is this culture different, do you feel?
That's true, Darren. We don't get scared around here. I think for me, Dan Campbell, when you talk to him, Bill Parcells was a big influence on Dan. And Bill Parcells used to do this thing where he'd pass around mousetraps in the locker room, and it was like the metaphor of don't take the cheese, or else you're going to end up with a trap. And for me, we're talking to Dan Campbell this afternoon in our production meeting. I kind of want to ask him about this, just how that mindset of not falling into the trap of the hype. There's a lot of it, and rightfully so, but every single player, it's like it's drilled in their mind to not take the cheese and fall into the mousetrap. I think that has been really impressive for me because there could be a lot of distractions, Darren, in a situation like that. Where you have that many fans at a camp, where you have, you turn on your phone and it's impossible not to see. I'd have to imagine as a player, it's impossible for us not to see. So not falling into that trap, really, that feels real. And the gravity that Dan Campbell has in the locker room, his coaching staff has in the locker room, and Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, coming back after he was potentially interested in some head coaching jobs, and rightfully so. He's so good at what he does. And then Aaron Glenn coming back for another year as the defensive coordinator. I think there's a coaching staff here that the players really trust, and you can feel the rapport between players and coaches, and that for me has really jumped out. I've really enjoyed watching some of the guys going from maybe year 1 to year 2, like an Aiden Hutchinson, or year 2 to year 3, like an Aleem McNeil. That's really jumped out to me. Some of the younger players that we just drafted, such as a Brian Branch in the secondary. There's some players to maybe keep an eye on tomorrow. Starling Thomas is an undrafted defensive back who might have a chance at making a roster spot. And then you have veterans you brought in the offseason. For me, Darren, this is a big point, like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's another safety, and his presence, and the guy like Cam Sutton, who's also another defensive back brought in this offseason, a veteran. Their presence on some of the younger guys, like Kirby Joseph, is really feeding off C.J. Gardner-Johnson. and their personalities combined, you hear and feel every day at camp. I think the fans love that. But it's having veterans like that, I think more depth too, Darren, because I was talking to our good friend Lomas Brown the other day, and he mentioned a good point that maybe a season ago with injuries, say you suffer an injury at cornerback, you don't have as much depth and there's a steeper drop-off. Whereas this year, I feel if you do have an injury, which is kind of inevitable in the game of football at some point, there isn't as much of a steep drop-off this year. So I am looking forward to seeing the secondary in these preseason games over the next couple of weeks. Not sure how much we'll actually see the veterans play, but I think I'm almost even more excited to watch some of the younger guys behind them going into, say, year 2 or year 3, and how much maybe they've improved. Some of the linebackers as well. It's a pretty crowded linebacker room. You have your leaders there, such as Alex Anzalone, but then you have some other guys who are drafted, like Jack Campbell out of Iowa. Jahmyr Gibbs, running back out of Alabama, who he drafted, has been super impressive at camp. I think fans are really going to love watching him because that guy is a weapon. So there's some fun names, and I'm pumped to watch tomorrow. And we've got the broadcast next week against Jacksonville as well. But the veterans coming in here, Darren, I feel like that in combination with the coaching mindset of don't take that seize and fall into the trap is going to be that for me is what is different from the Lions we've watched in years past and what's building right now.
Well, Jason, certainly you're jumping in at a good time here, taking over the reins for the preseason for the Detroit Lions on the play-by-play. And, yes, it's an exciting time. But, Jason, I have to ask you, again, going back to it, as a local guy, local kid growing up here in the business and doing some things and getting the opportunity to call your hometown team. I know you're a pro, obviously. You'll do the job. That stuff, when the camera comes on, that stuff kind of goes away and you just call the game. That's what's kind of great about this business. But with that being said, Jason, I've always said, for people that ask me what's it like being a play-by-play broadcaster, I've always said that I feel bad for people that they don't get that producer in your ear 30 seconds before you go on air. And he comes on and he's like, all right, Jason, 30 seconds. What's going to go through your mind tomorrow night when he tells you 30 seconds till we're on the air? What's the biggest thing that's going to go through your mind then?
Yeah, that's a feeling that Neil, and I think for me, it's number one, just try to be thankful for the opportunity that's coming up in the next 30 seconds. And I think that, naturally, I think you have nerves doing something for the first time. But I think just hopefully being thankful for that opportunity is what will slow that down and just step into having fun, like we've talked about, and the excitement of this season. I think there's no reason not to smile the entire time because we've got one of the most anticipated seasons in franchise history coming up in the next 30 seconds. So for me, that's, I think, what I'll tell myself. Like, there's no reason not to just smile and be happy right now because this is super cool and the fans are super hyped. Let's just be hyped as well and have a good show, hopefully.
I'll say it for you, Jason Ross Jr. You're stoked. You're not scared. You're fully brick, baby. Go get them tomorrow. We'll be down there.
That's what I'm going to say to myself here, and we're stoked. We're not scared.
There he is.
100%.
Yeah, Jason, man, I appreciate you carving out the time. I know this is a super busy time for you, but thanks again, my friend. We're all proud of what you're doing, and we can't wait to tune in tomorrow.
No problem, Neil. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, Darren. Really appreciate you guys.
All right, Jason Ross Jr., the television play-by-play voice for the Detroit Lions for the preseason. Paul Thomas in the WoodwardSports.com chat thread. Jason is fantastic, and yes, he is. I'm excited for him and happy for him. And look, Darren, like in this field, I'll let everybody behind the curtain a little bit. The one thing I don't like about this field, and I've had great mentors like Mario Mpemba, who I think is the best broadcaster, one of the best broadcasters to ever do it in the state of Michigan. One of the parts I don't like about this field, a lot of people in this business have big egos. You know what I'm saying? And I don't like that because
it blows me away. Why?
Yeah,
you don't like
me
why?
Too. Me too.
To whatever you know what I love, Neil. It's the same thing honestly in how I view my cannabis brand. I compete with myself. You compete with yourself.
100%.
So it's all tides raise the ships and stuff. But you're right, the ego. So you have to find out. And there's a lot of people that are in it for themselves that are, we hear all the stories and stuff like that. Around here, it's not like that. It really isn't like that. And I can speak from all the people, in the Red Wings, whether it's Mickey and Ken or Ken Cal or Paul Woods or whoever, everybody's for the benefit of the product, right? And it seems that way. That's what's also, too, you look at the opportunity that the Lions are giving different guys. We know how great Dapper Dan is. He's one of the best in the business and come game time. But to see a guy like Jason Ross Jr., who's put the time in being a local kid, get the opportunity, it shows me that guy like yourself that have done it around here, it's not when, it's when.
No, absolutely. And certainly that is not Jason. And love that guy and want nothing but success for him. I want success for everybody, man.